Monday morning quarterback in the Atlantic. He also received the Atlanta Sports Council Lifetime Achievement Award in 2023. For those of you that may not know, the Atlanta Sports Council is part of the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and they work with the stadiums, Georgia World Congress Center, Atlanta Convention Visitors Bureau, the City of Atlanta, to bring major sporting events here to Atlanta, like a very small one happening this summer and next summer. World Cup and World Cup. So I hope you all are getting excited about that. The other exciting, notable thing that will go on his resume is he will chair the Metro Atlanta Chamber 2026, which we're excited. And Matt Ryan, of course, all of us, I believe, are familiar with Matt, also affectionately known as Matty Ice, is the former professional football quarterback who played 15 seasons in the NFL, most of them with the Atlanta Falcons, and I believe you were inducted into the Ring of Honor last year. I was there. I thought that was a tremendous opportunity to recognize the achievements for the Falcons in the city of Atlanta. He also holds numerous franchise records. We won't get into all of those. Was also named the NFL MVP in 2016. And of course, he led many of those successes that are listed under Rich. Led those appearances. So with that, I'm going to close by saying his current role, besides being a dad to 3 boys, is he's an analyst for CBS Sports. So, Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you and Matt. No, yeah.
Speak up. Yeah. Good morning. Thank you for being here. So you get a chance to talk to Matt Ryan. You don't get a chance to talk to me. Matt is the important one here, so I'll be quick. Let me say a couple things about Matt because I grew up in the numbers business. So played 14 years. He was the 3rd overall pick. Led us to a record of 120 and 102, and 381 career touchdowns. Was the NFL MVP in 2016. But I think the numbers that matter to me are how did he get there? So think of this: every year, 1,200,000 kids play high school football. 50,000 of those 1,200,000 get scholarships to college. 250 of those 50,000 make it to the NFL. And 1 gets to play 14 years and be an NFL MVP, and that would be Matt Ryan. So that's a pretty cool there are ways to achieve things, and that's achievement at the highest level. So, Matt, before we get into leadership, let's get into parenting. So tell us a little bit about where the kids are and how MYO is going.
Okay, yes. So I am a father of 3 young boys. I've got 2 boys.
Yeah, it's on green.
There we go. You can tell I'm an office in the TV. Getting the light on is tough for one, but I'm a father of 3 young boys. So I have 3 boys that just turned 7, Marshall and Johnny, and I've got a younger son, Cal, who will be 2 in April. And so coaching baseball over at MYO, which has been a blast. We had a first game last night. We got rocked. I think it was like 27 to 16. I am the pitcher, so obviously I didn't pitch well enough for you to score enough runs, but it's a ton of fun, and it's been great to see them grow up and develop, specifically here in Atlanta. It's a great place to raise a family, great place for young kids to grow and develop, and we love being here, so thank you.
All right, let's go leadership. I heard you tell the story before. I think it's one that people will enjoy. Tell us how you grew into the leadership when you got to the Falcons and how you felt you were and became the quarterback, how you stayed back and then moved forward in your leadership role as you progressed.
Yeah, I think coming in, obviously when you're drafted high, there's an expectation and a level of expectation for you to come in and perform right away. But there's guys that have been in that locker room for a long time, guys that are highly accomplished players, that you're coming in and having to play with. And the other interesting thing is, your whole life playing sports, you're playing with other guys that are your age, right? So whether it's NYO for my kids, you're playing with people who are in your grade, who are the same age as you. And then even to college or high school, you're playing with, other teammates that are within 2 or 3 years that are in the same life experience as you are. But then you get to the NFL, and it's very different, right? I was 23 years old. We had a center, Todd McClure, who was probably 32, 31, 32.
Going on 60.
Yeah, exactly. He was an old soul. But, he was at a different stage in life where he's got young kids and a wife, and I'm dating my now wife. She's my girlfriend at the time. We're dealing with different issues. We had Todd Weiner, who was playing offensive line for us, another guy. He was probably 35 years old, and same thing, a bunch of kids running around in a different stage of life. But when you play the quarterback position, there's a level of, whether you want it or not, you are the leader of that offense when you're in the huddle. You're the one talking. And so when I first got there down to Atlanta, I remember walking into the locker room during OTAs, which is this time of the year where you're practicing in April and May and June. And we had an older player on our team, Lawyer Malloy. Lawyer was a crusty, salty, veteran player. And I'm sitting in the old locker room at the time, and my locker was kind of right where everybody walked in, right past the equipment room. And it's like 6:30 in the morning, and it's dead quiet in there. I think I'm the only person in there. And Lawyer walks in, and I'm sitting there, and he says, "Hey, what's up, man?" I'm like, "Hey, Lawyer, how you doing?" And he goes, "Do you hear that?" I'm like, "No. What are you talking about?" He's like, "Exactly." He's like, "This place needs a sound system." All right, so I kept my mouth shut. Didn't say anything. And at the end of OTAs, we get the 6 weeks off before training camp starts. And I went to our equipment manager at the time, Brian Boydner, and I said, "Hey, what would it take to get a sound system, put in here, right? What would it take to get like a really state-of-the-art one?" And he goes, "All right, let me look at it. Probably talk to Spencer, Treadwell, and Chris Minnings to figure out how we're going to do it." Luckily, I said I would pay for it, so that wasn't any, more hair off of Rich's head. I was going to take care of it. Yeah. So anyhow, they ended up putting this sound system in over the summer, and I remember getting back from training camp a couple days early, and Brian Boydner was like, "Hey, we got a name that sounds really good." So I'm in there by myself, and he turns it on, pumped it, right? And it's really, really good. So the first day of training camp, I am just waiting at my locker for Lawyer to walk in. I cannot wait for him to walk into the locker room. And the minute he does, they cue it up in the back, and the bass is pumping, and this thing is loud. It's about to blow people out of the locker room. He looks at me and goes, "That's right." That's what I'm talking about. But to your point on leadership, I think as a young player, there are things that you need to do to garner respect. And to tip the cap to the guys that have been there before. And that was a small example in my case of saying, "I hear you, I can do my part, I can pull my weight and be one of the guys." And so early on in my career, it was little things like that, trying to earn respect. But I've always maintained that, and I think this with little boys raising sons, boys see better than they hear. My guys do not listen to me. Maybe to some other people, but not to me. But they see, right? And I think the same is true as a player, right? Teammates see better than they hear. And you can't fool people every day, right? You can fool them for, a week or a month or an off season or something like that. But you can't fool them every day you show up. And I always had the mindset that I wanted to set a tone with the way that I worked and the way that I did things that people had to respect. And that was really the start for me of coming in and trying to own that locker room.
Really cool. So let's go to adversity. Just take us through leadership through adversity. Take us through whatever moment you want in your career that you faced big time adversity, or the team did, and what you did in your leadership role to kind of show how to get this done.
Yeah, I think the obvious. I think the obvious, biggest time of adversity that we went through was losing that Super Bowl to the
Sorry, we have to go there.
No, but listen, I think this is the most relatable thing. Whether it's in business, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's anything, right? It's this idea that we all experience it at different stages, where you have the best of intentions and you have worked your absolute hardest and you perform really, really well. And it doesn't go your way, right? And you fall a little bit short. And I think of that team and the disappointment, the frustration, the heartbreak that was there. But life is about getting back up. It really is in the toughest of circumstances. And it's about owning the narrative. I think in those cases, Steak is in here, Steak Shapiro is in here, and he's in the media world. And at the time, every interview that we had, every time that we stood in front of the camera or stood in front of the microphone, we were going to be asked about 28-3. And how could you guys do that? How could you not win? How could you not do it? And I remember Dan Quinn, who was the head coach at the time, in our leadership group of players saying, you know what, we know we're going to be asked this. We're going to be prepared for it. And quite frankly, we're going to own it, and we're going to move forward. And we did that, and we just went back to work. And we didn't put too much expectation on that next game. And one of the things I'm most proud of in my career is the 2017 season that we had. Answering those questions all the time. We found a way to get to 10-6. People forget, during that Super Bowl run, we had a lot of balls bounce our way, right, to finish 11-5, to get the 2 seed. The next season, we had a lot of balls not bounce our way, right, and went in the other direction, and we somehow grinded out a way to get into the playoffs. We went out to LA, we beat a very good Rams team that was ascending at the time, that would go on to the Super Bowl a couple of years later. Guys like Aaron Donald, who weren't household names at the time, but were impact players as young players. We went out and beat that team, and then we went up to Philadelphia, and we lost. And we had a great run, a really good opportunity at the end of the game, and just fell a little bit short, and they went on to win a Super Bowl. But the point of my story is, number one, it's about getting back up, and number two, it's about owning the narrative, right, and not letting the narrative define you. And I think that team really was incredible in that sense.
So I thought, from my perspective, that was one of the coolest years in kind of my whole career, was that year, because I felt like everywhere we went, every question we got, every emotion we felt was, hey, what about last year? And you guys never allowed that to be, the narrative. And I think that trip to the Rams, because we were playing against my son worked for the Rams, and we beat their ass. It was just a fantastic trip. So let's go from adversity to one that I'd like to ask is accountability. How do you, you're the quarterback, how are you holding people accountable for what they're supposed to do? Given the role you have, given the role the coaches have, how do you fit in that leadership role? And when the wide receiver runs the corner route, you see he's supposed to run the big and you throw him the pick. How are you handling the accountability to him?
So, it's a loaded question, right? There's a lot to this. I kind of break it down. I think, number one, the quarterback is, and I'm sure there's these positions in everyone's company, but the quarterback is really in a unique spot, right? Where you are a conduit between the front office and the players. You're that go-between between the coaching staff and the players. You're the go-between between the ownership and the players. And sometimes between the front office and the coaches, right? And so as you become more of a veteran player, you get pulled into all of these meetings where you're having conversations, with a Thomas Dimitroff or a Terry Fontenot about players and how they fit into the scheme. But when you leave that meeting has to stay there, right? And you go back into the locker room, and then you have to be one of the guys. And so first and foremost, my responsibility was always to be right in the locker room. We could have the conversations that I would have upstairs with head coaches or coordinators or GMs or ownership or Rich McKay. But it stayed there. And when I went to the locker room, we had to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing for me was to be one of the guys in the locker room. And so I always, try to balance that really well. And that allowed me then to hold players to account on the field. And my thing was, I was going to be really, really hard on you during the week as a player. So in practice, right, from film sessions on Monday to practice on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even the review sessions that we would have on Saturday prior to going into the game, I was going to be really tough. And I always believed that, we wanted to make the week harder than the game. But game day, I felt like we need to champion each other because it is so hard. It is so highly competitive. So in game, I was not I'm going to berate you, I'm going to get on you. It was an encouraging time to try and lift players up because it's so difficult to do. But during the week you might catch it. If you ran posts when you were supposed to run a day, you were going to catch an earful. And I was going to let you know that I needed you there in that spot. Because there's a responsibility, there's a loneliness that comes with leadership sometimes. But at the end of the day, in that huddle, 2 minutes left to go, and you've got to go down and score a touchdown to win. All the other 10 guys are looking at you to instill confidence in them, and you have to let them know that you're on it during the week and that you've held them to account. And they want that, and they need it in those situations. So that was always the way I tried to view it.
Criticism, let's go to the next one. How do you deal with, your leader of the team, everybody gets applauded and lauded until Sunday doesn't go our way, and then all of a sudden, it's the end of the world and all that. How did you deal, and how did you internalize and or respond to criticism?
I think it's the nature of playing the position that you play in the NFL, right? Is you've heard the adage all the time: quarterbacks, too much credit, too much blame, and it's true. But understanding and taking that at face value and recognizing that right from the start, I think is really important. That the criticism that you're taking is not always warranted, and the praise that you're getting is not always warranted too. And so putting that in the proper perspective, I think, is important. The other thing I think is, we would talk in our locker room all the time about a standard for our daily, effort, how we prepare, the effort that we would give, the attention to detail that we would give. And that standard needed to be higher than anybody asking questions. And quite frankly, that was the way I always looked at it. Yes, you can critique me, and yes, that's fair, that's part of the business. I do it now. That's part of what I do. But your standard for yourself and your standard for what you do as a team has to be higher than anybody else's expectation for you. And everybody says that. But bringing that to life really is the key. And when you do that, and you have people holding each other to account as teammates, the criticism or the praise is easy to deal with, because you just put it away and you hold the person that you see every day, that you share a locker with, or that you're in the huddle with. That's the person that you need to make right, or that's the person whose opinion actually matters. And those are the things that I always try to keep in perspective. Not always easy, and sometimes that gets out of balance, but you always try and bring it back to that. Who am I doing this with? What is their opinion of me? And how can I make it right for them?
I always appreciated that you never really made it personal with any, numbers in the media and so forth, because I think sometimes I've always found myself over the years, every once in a while you get that, the person gets under your skin just a little bit. I give you credit, I never saw that in you. I definitely saw it in me.
No, there's one, Ryan Finley. Ryan Finley. Only because he was a former teammate. He was the one who would get under my skin.
He's still running the 40 because I don't think he could ever finish. He's so slow. He was slow though. Tell us about, as a player, all the things that you and Sarah have done, just investing back into Atlanta and in the community. How did that fit into your time, and how important was that in you and what you guys want to accomplish?
Well, I like the way that you phrased it too, investing, back into the community. I think oftentimes there's this idea of charity, right, of donating, of just giving money to things. But I really view it, like you said, as investing in our city. And I think you make time for the things that are important to you, no matter how busy you are. And something that was instilled in me as a child from my parents was, that old adage of to whom much is given, much is expected. And I remember my parents telling me that all the time from a young age. And then here I am at 25, and I'm in that position to be able to impact this community. And so I think, you find time and you find ways that you can, dive into areas that need help. For us, for my wife and I, it's always been about kids. And that's been the area of passion for us. And whether that was, when I first got down here helping out with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is incredible with all that they do, specifically at the Aflac Cancer Center and, blood disorder sector of the hospital. So that was something that was important to us. My wife volunteered at the Boys and Girls Club in Lawrenceville before we got married and before we had kids, and she was unbelievable there. But that shifted, our focus shifted really in the spring and summer of 2020, when all the social unrest was going on across the country. We were in the midst of COVID. It was a really strange time. And I was in a virtual team meeting that we had on Zoom, and we were having candid conversations about how we as players can make impacts on our communities. And I remember Ricardo Allen, who's a teammate of mine here in Atlanta, quite frankly saying, if we want to make a change in the Black community in Atlanta, we need white people to help. We need white people to step up. It's going to take all of us if we want things to be different. I remember that hitting me of like, I have been silently there, for some of the teammates' endeavors that they were doing, but never vocally, never, put my name on anything, and felt like there was this real opportunity in a city as diverse as ours, right, to try and bring things together. And I know so many people have done an amazing job of that, but I felt like it was important for me to do that at that time. So we created, a charitable trust. Honestly, I was just going to donate money, but somebody smarter than myself said, why don't you open it up to a GoFundMe account and see what this turns into? And the overwhelming support that we got, I think we raised like 1.3 million in less than 2 weeks from outside donations, which was incredible. Some large, some as small as $2. We had over $500 donations of $2, which was my number with the Falcons at the time. Of people wanting to give what they could at that time. And so I felt like I was not smart enough to figure out what to do with this. I had to find people that were, and as a result of that, we developed the charitable trust, ATL, and it's going really, really well. We kind of localized the west side of Atlanta, and try and impact after school and summer programming there. It's been really good, but I view that as an investment, right? We've got one of the greatest wealth discrepancies in the world, in our city, and I view it as both sides' responsibilities, whether you are very high net worth or low, to try and bridge that gap, and we're trying to do the best we can.
Okay, so you brought me back to one thing on your number selection. I think that was another.
You want me to wear number 2?
Yeah, so let's go back to the number selection. How did you leave the college number and go to number 2?
So I remember getting drafted. And Arthur nicely had flown me down and my family immediately after the draft in New York. And I was on there with Ted Cruz, who's now one of the big wigs for the Chicago Bears. Ted has done an amazing job of growing and ascending as an executive in our league. And I was on there, and he's like, "Hey, we got to talk about numbers." He's like, "I know you were 12 in college." Michael Jenkins was here with the Falcons at the time. He was wearing 12. He's like, "I'm sure, if you wanted to, you could probably buy that from him. You could take it." And I was like, "Listen, Jenkins, he's a really good player, and he's had a great run here in Atlanta. I'll go with something different. I wore number 2 in college." And he was like, "Okay, it's interesting." I said, "Nobody really wears 2 like quarterback position. We don't really like, And I remember, I'm young, and he comes back, he's like, "Would you consider a different number?" And it was my first time putting my foot down as a Falcon, and I said, "No, I'm wearing number 2." And I think that was a good decision. I think it worked out pretty well.
Worked out fine. There were a bunch of us upstairs that were like, 2? Are you sure? And then
There's a lot of quarterbacks wearing 2 now.
But the other thing about that story is it because some of us did talk to Jake. I mean, we said, "Hey, Jake, listen, it's the 3rd pick in the draft. We need this guy to really be successful. It's kind of face the franchise quarterback." And he's looking, yeah. We said, "Okay, wait, please keep 12. So, yeah.
I think that was going to be an expensive transaction.
Yeah, it was, and it was going to have to be on your nickel. So let's just go quickly. I'll just answer a couple quick ones, and then I'll let them ask. Most important character traits of a good leader.
I think it's 3. I think there are 3 here. I think number 1, know where you're going, right? You can't take people with you if you don't know where you're going. Number 2, you got to know who's going with you. You have to know the people that you're leading. And then I think number 3 is you've got to have unwavering principles, but you've got to be flexible in how you apply those principles. And for me, that was the three buckets I always try to put them in.
How do you encourage young people to take risks in their careers?
Listen, I think the one common denominator that I found with all the people, the players specifically, that were wildly successful was they had unbelievable self-belief, right? They believed they could do it before anybody else believed they could do it. And, whether that was founded or unfounded, sometimes you didn't know, but the belief was there. And that's what I would encourage, any young person, going to take a risk is the people who end up being successful are the ones that don't give in when it's hard, right? And they have the belief that they're going to do it unwavering. And that's what I'm trying to instill in my own boys.
How about best advice you've ever been given, and by who?
There's a lot. Yeah, Rich is
sure one, yeah.
Rich gave it too. Honestly, listen, Rich was one of the first guys after I finished up my season in Indianapolis. I called and we sat down and we had breakfast, and I was looking to kind of figure out what I was doing with my life. So Rich is somebody that I do go to for advice in a lot of different situations. It was very helpful in that meeting, but I'm not going to talk about what we talked about in that. That was great advice, but not the best. My dad, it's great advice. My dad told me when I was young, he said, you need to be able to go into any room with anyone from any walk of life and be comfortable in your own skin talking to them. And I remember that, I don't know why, but I remember that hitting. And in my life, I feel like I have walked into rooms with a lot of different people, at the highest of the highs or wherever they may be on the life spectrum, and you have to be comfortable and relatable. And I think that was one of the things that helped me lead teammates and kind of get the best out of guys, is that I can meet people where they're at, and I always try to do that.
Other than the way he dresses, what do you most admire about Arthur?
He does dress well. I don't know who his tailor is, but it's always impeccably tailored. The thing I respect most about Arthur is how much he has given back to the city. There are few, if any, human beings who have given more of their time, effort, money to making this place and this city what it is. And that was something that I recognized early on, coming to the organization. It's something that, when you see those core values that used to be in the lunchroom, in the cafeteria, that were there, right, and they're still there, philanthropy and giving back and giving your time was right in there. And so that is the thing I probably respect the most. Outside of his energy.
He's got plenty of energy.
He does not stop.
Oh, really? There's a text from this morning, I think it was like 6:15, so yes, I'm saying it. If you could do one thing in your career over again, hey, I want to do over for that, what would it be?
I mean,
Don't. Let's go to the audience question. I hate that question, and I'm trying to move on. Okay? Go ahead.
Question. Anyone? Here we go. Right here. Chauncey.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us. Good morning, everyone. Charlotte catching from Cisco. I went to an exhibit. It was Jay-Z's blueprint at the Brooklyn Museum, and something stuck with me when I saw that a couple of years ago. It was, the greats have a knowing. It's something that can't be taught. It's something that you just know that you're going to be amazing at that one thing. And I would love to know from both you, Mr. McKay and Ryan, when did you know?
you want to start, Rich?
For me, it always came back to my parents. I knew based on what my parents taught me that if I just followed the path they led for me and who they wanted me to be, I could still be myself and I would be successful. I felt like that's why I cherish so much Matt and Sarah and what they're trying to be as parents. 'Cause I felt like for them, they gave me the opportunity, not just by the financial and schooling and all that, but by what they taught me. They gave me everything I needed to have to be successful.
Yeah, I think I would start with my parents too, just kind of instilling in you that you can go for it, right? It's okay, shoot your shot. And that was always the way I was raised. But you know, my story, at least in the NFL, is interesting, right? So I wasn't a crazy recruit coming out of high school. Ran the triple option at Penn Charter, and if anybody watched me play, I'm not a fit for the triple option. It's not a fit for that. But somehow, some way, got a scholarship to go to Boston College and was at BC and always wanted it, right? Like I knew from a young age I wanted to be a professional athlete, whatever it was, football, basketball, baseball, didn't matter. I wanted to do that. And my avenue happened to be in football. But I remember being at BC and it was going into my senior year. And I knew in my head, I was like, I can do this. Like, I know I can do this. But I remember the Friday before our first game, we had new coaching staff come in my senior year, and our offensive coordinator was a guy named Steve Logan, who's a great coach, awesome coach. And we had a walkthrough on Friday afternoon. We're getting ready to play Wake Forest the next day. And after the walkthrough finishes up, he says, sit down on the bench next to me. And so I'm like, oh man, I don't know what he's about to say. But he said, listen to me. He said, I know you know that you're the best player in the country. And he said, tomorrow, if we have to throw it 75 times, we're going to throw it 75 times. But you're going to take us where we want to go this season. And you're going to take yourself wherever you want to go in life. And I remember sitting there, and it was just validation for somebody that I respected, validating what I thought about myself. And it was the moment I knew. And my life changed sitting on that bench at Boston College on a Friday afternoon before we played Wake Forest.
One over here.
Hi, Jason Serrano from Cox Communications. The NFL is extremely talented and skilled people. I'm curious more about the people that were, I guess, more emotional or less talented that made an impact on you to show that they could go above and beyond what they were capable of, and how did it impact you throughout your career?
So many players. I often say, you know, the higher you go in athletics, right? Whether you leave elementary school and go to high school, or go from high school to college, or college to the NFL, talent becomes less relevant every notch you go up, because everybody has it. Everybody has it. Everybody's really good. So the talent portion of it is the least relevant as you get to the NFL. The players I admired the most were the ones that raised their floor, right? That had this floor that was really, really high. You know, the guys that would do exactly what they did in practice in the game, because they were the ones you could count on. Your superstars, like Julio Jones was going to make plays that were unbelievable. Roddy White the same, Tony Gonzalez the same. You know, but I think of players like Brian Finley that you mentioned earlier, right? That was incredibly consistent. The effort was excellent. Going to dig people out, blocking as a wide receiver to open things up in the run game, or setting the tone for those guys. That was how their impact was felt. And I loved teammates that kind of raised their floor to a level of, you just knew exactly what you were going to get from them. And maybe the ceiling wasn't high, the wild plays weren't going to be there, but you could count on their performance week in and week out. I think of other wide receivers like Aldrick Robinson in that 2016 season, right? Like these are the players that when Julio Jones goes down for 3 or 4 games in the month of December, Aldrick steps up and made a ton of plays for us, or Jacob Tammany, or an Austin Hooper. Guys that were incredibly consistent performers, that maybe didn't have the ceiling other players had, but their floor, you knew exactly where their floor was going to be every week. And I think that's an incredibly valuable part of an organization.
Good morning, Matt and Rich. Everybody, thank you for Mr. Chambers to inviting us. My name is Cameron Hines from Atlanta College. My question is, we've seen teams integrating more digital AR, VR, esports elements into the fan experience. Are the Falcons looking to emerging technology to enhance stadium engagement or to create new revenue streams? I ask because I'm working on an immersive fan experience that would allow to ship for the Falcons. And if you know anybody I can contact with,
I do know people. Okay, so fan experience, it is, yes, I would say that the immersive experiences that stadiums have and stadiums are engaging today is crazy, way beyond what it once was. We were in California. I want to say on a business trip, so I want everybody to say, tell Arthur that I was on a business trip. I went to Intuit Arena. I went to Pasadena to a whole kind of funky new immersive reality experience to see that before I went to the arena. But I really went out to see the grandbaby. But that being said, it was a business trip. The cool thing about this technology is, and Delta, our sponsor for this, Delta has utilized this technology in 2 different airports. And it just shows you where this whole thing is going, because it's facial recognition, unique experience kind of technology. So it's a board that Matt and I would look at this board, but the message to Matt and the message to me, even though we're this close, is completely different. And as Matt moves that way, the message keeps going with him. And I'm still looking to say, why is he seeing something different than I'm seeing? It was just, the technology was just extraordinary. So yes, we're all into that. Anything we can do to create a one-on-one experience for our fans we like, specifically for our season ticket holders, whether that's Falcons or United. Because in the one-off events, in the concerts and all that, it's much tougher to create that unique experience. We just rely on what we do well. But in the season ticket space, we can't stop doing enough because the expectation of the fan gets higher and higher, and your experience at home gets better and better. So yes, we're all into it. I'll make sure that Katie gives you everything you need of me.
Rich, I got a question for you. So, great conversation. How do you focus on grit? How does one develop grit over time? So if you're trying to look at talking to young people to understand the importance of how grit comes into life and living successfully. So I'd like to hear from both of you on the topic of grit and grind. I think it's so important, and I think it's become tougher and tougher, at least in the football space. When you look at the current climate of the transfer portal in college football, I think it has stolen a bit of experience for young athletes to develop grit. And so I think of my experience at Boston College. I get there as a freshman, I redshirt. The next year, I'm the backup quarterback. My third year, my sophomore year, whatever, however you want to view it. My third year, I've been in school for 3 years at this point. I get beat out in training camp by another quarterback. I go to the bench. I sit for 3 or 4 weeks. He ends up getting hurt. I get an opportunity to go in and I play. He comes back healthy and I go back to the bench after having played well. Then I kind of run this, go in at the end of the games and somehow win a game and still go back to the bench. And I really believe there were these opportunities of getting news that you don't want to get, that's outside of your control, that build up inside of you. And I'm a believer of not robbing people of the experience to fail and to fail forward, because I believe that's the best way to develop that grit. And I've seen it from so many different guys, right? So many different players that I've been a part of. But I think, it's the shortcomings in your life that kind of develop the callous that you need to have as a competitor or as a person to be able to handle the hard things that come your way. So not robbing people of opportunities to grow, right? Because I think that is so important. And then I think it's partly just your mindset too, and the experiences that you have as a young person. I remember my uncle played quarterback at Boston College, so I always had this affinity growing up of going to BC. I thought it was a really cool place. In his experience, he was starting quarterback at BC in the early 80s and broke his thumb. And in to replace him is Doug Flutie. Right? And so that's his story. And he's like, I never broken my thumb. You know, maybe Doug's career is different, maybe my career is very different. I broke my foot as a junior at Boston College, broke my fifth metatarsal in my left foot against Virginia Tech at home midway through the season. And you would have had to shoot me to take me out of the game. And I played the rest of the season on a broken fifth metatarsal, strictly because in the back of my head, the story that I had as a young player was my uncle broke his thumb, left, and the guy that replaced him won the Heisman Trophy. That's not happening. You're gonna have to drag me off the field, right? You're gonna have to drag me off the field. And whether that's right or wrong, that was just, it's the little things that pop up in your life along the way, and it's how you perceive them. So I'd encourage everyone to keep your eyes open. You never know what experiences are the ones that shape your life. And then, you know, don't rob them of experiences to grow.
Yeah, so for me, I definitely agree with Matt. It comes from failure, and it comes from your ability to handle failure. But for me, what really helped me early in my career was my dad made a point to me once of, remember, mentors aren't given. You got to pick them yourself. You got to go figure out who they should be. Don't just gravitate to the person that, you know, comes to you and wants to put their arm around you. You need to pick them based on who they are and how they conduct themselves and who they want to be. And for me, that was probably the biggest thing that changed my direction. Was I went for a federal judge. I thought I was going to be the greatest lawyer since Clarence Darrow. Everything was great. I went to this firm. We were doing great. Everything was great. I got called in by the lead partner of the firm, Dan Hill. The firm was Hill, Morton, Henderson, so it's never good when you have a first name calls you in. And I knew, you know, I was killing it. I was pretty much, you know, just a fantastic associate. And he gave me the speech that still is in my mind. I'm still there every day, which is, hey, how do you feel like you're doing? I said, fantastic. He said, yeah, good. He said, I'm going to move your office today, and you're going to move next to mine. And I said, wow, okay, good, no problem. Yeah, sure, I'm down there. I'm going to get this little office. Okay, no problem. And he said, I moved your parking space, and you're going to be next to mine. And I said, seems like a theme. And he said, we're just going to have one rule. He said, I noticed you work on Saturdays. I noticed you never come in on Sunday. I'm like, yeah, I didn't really figure Sunday was a big day. But yeah, he said, just remember, I kind of want to go for the next year. I just don't want to be here when your car's not here. I just want to make sure that when you leave, my car is still here. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I went home and I told my wife, and she said, you know, he was just trying to give you a little bit of a message. He was probably overplaying it. But I felt like he changed the direction of how I looked at work for the stage of the career I was in, like crazy. And I think that he made me from that point select the people that I wanted to follow. I looked at them instead of the guys that really drank beer well, I went for the guys that really were successful in what they did. I went, you know, and I feel like as I got into my career, that had a huge impact on me. Because when I got to hire my first football coach, I interviewed 10 guys and I knew all their lives. I knew, and I picked one, and still the best hire I ever made in my life. And that was Tony Dungy. And I picked Tony because I knew he was the ultimate mentor. There's no young player that could play for anybody that was better than Tony. So to me, the mentors that you pick matter the most.
Hey there, Julie Sykes from Gensler. I'd love to get both of your perspective as you think about the NFL in the next 5 to 10 years. It feels like the football world is changing rapidly between the portal, injuries, players are getting bigger, and just where do you see this going? And Rich, very cool news yesterday on Grady Jarrett. I'm a fan and a Clemson fan, so That's awesome.
I'm distraught about Grady Jerry going to another team, but I'll say this about Grady Jerry. He is one of the cool dudes of all time. As Matt knows, pleasant teammate, because there aren't many guys that come in at his size, and we look at him and you go, defensive tackle. And all he does is play great, and he will be great, and at one point he will be living in Atlanta for the rest of his life. I would think that would be the case right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Grady's, we got another Clemson guy sitting right here, AJ Terrell, which is, these guys are producing talent. I don't know how you all produce talent like that, keep coming. NFL players from Clemson. Grady is one of the best teammates I ever played with. You know, in terms of production on the field, talk about like that floor we were talking about earlier. His floor was incredibly high. His consistency, week in and week out, to show up, to be productive, is amazing. But the way he goes about his work too, right? Every day coming in, he works extremely hard. He doesn't say much, but when he does, you listen. You know, he has a powerful voice when he speaks. He's going to do a great job in Chicago. I think he'll finish his career in a really strong way. As far as where the NFL is going in the next 5 years, I think the game's in an incredible place. I really do. You know, looking at it now from the other perspective, not as a player, but as an analyst and kind of a talking head, there's so many great storylines. You think about the quarterback position in general. It's probably as good right now from top to bottom as it's ever been. There's so many young, talented players that are coming in, and the position has really changed. You know, we talk about the change in that position in the last 5 years. I think that's only going to continue. You see more athleticism at the position, you know, more improvisation, but you know that idea of throwing from the pocket, you still have to be able to do it, and that's what's so incredible about the guys that are doing it now, is they have all of these skill sets. So I think the game's in a great position. I love expanding internationally. I think, you know, at some point, I've talked to Roger about this. I'm sure Rich has talked to Roger about this. At some point, every week there's going to be a game internationally. I don't know if it'll ever be an organization internationally. Rich can probably speak to that. I think there's a lot of challenges that might come to this, but I think there'll be 16 weeks of games, you know, across the globe. And anywhere that soccer is played, football is going to be played by the NFL.
Yes, I think Matt's point international is certainly true. It's definitely coming. We'll play, you know, 6 games, we'll go to 8 games, and we will eventually probably go to 16 games, meaning a game a week. Even if we go to 18, maybe it's 18 games. I think we figured out as teams, as I think Matt saw in his career, we figured out how to travel now. We figured out how to do international travel, and we don't go a week in advance like we did, you know, going to London the first time, and, you know, it felt like we were worn out at the end of it. So I do believe that's there. I think as far as the NFL goes, and why the NFL sits where we sit, is that the one thing that I think we're willing to do as a league that other leagues need to be willing to do is just focus on the game, the fans, and health and safety, those 3 things, and you're in pretty good stead. The game traditionally for us, we have so many people that have been on this rules committee for 32 years, 31 years, and you know, every time we go to look at rules at the end of the year, we change 5, 10 rules, and every year we go to a meeting to vote on them. 5 coaches stand up and say, we've ruined football, it'll never be the same, it's the worst game in the history of the world, I can't believe we're doing this. But we always say, remember, the only reason we're in this room is because of fans. No fans, no game. You guys go out and play and go into the stadium, it's all great. No fans, no game. So points matter, plays matter, time of game matters, penalties matter, they all matter. So I think as a league, we're good at that. We pay attention to that. I think health and safety, we were late, we were a little late in the game, and it caused us some issues on the concussion front and others. I think we're in a really good place right now. with probably the least amount of injuries we've had in the history of football this year with 17 games. When typically we've had 16 games. Certainly the least amount of concussions we've ever had in a season. So our rules are always going to focus on safety and are always going to focus on the fans. So I feel really good about where the game is. I am much more concerned about college football. I grew up the son of a college football coach, and it's different, and that is a concern.
I have to tell a funny story about Rich being on the competition committee and the rules changes, some of which I heavily disagree with. So we were playing Buffalo in 2021, it was my last year with Falcons, and it's a tight ball game, and we're going down, and I scrambled to the right, and I think it maybe been the year before they changed the rule on if you know, as a quarterback, if you slide feet first, you give yourself up, and if you dive, you don't. You get to wherever your touchdown. And I disagree with that rule change. Honestly, I think the way to protect yourself as a quarterback when you're going to get extra yards is to dive head first. You can kind of protect yourself. You can see where you're going and kind of knife the defense. They also changed this taunting rule, right? So we're playing Buffalo, and I slide head first. Think I have scored a touchdown. The defender
Celebrated early, I might say. Celebrated early.
Hold on, time out. So I slide head first. The defender's trying to spear me, but I protected myself, diving head first. Think I have scored a touchdown. Get up, spike the ball, might have said something to the defender. Get flagged for a taunting penalty. Turns out they replay the touchdown. My knee was down, so I had given myself up. Tight ball game. Plus a 15-yard penalty. It goes from a touchdown to like 3rd and 19 from the 19-yard line. And we end up losing this game. We obviously didn't score a touchdown. We end up losing this game. I'm going into the locker room and I'm like, Rich! What the?
And he did. And he used way worse language than just
So anyhow, we can all agree with the rule changes.
All right, we have time for one more, and then I'll close this out.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Najee Gadsden from Crystal Ray, Atlanta. So you talked about one of your pillars of leadership being knowing who you're leading. So being in the locker room with 53, 55 players with different egos, a lot of alpha males in the room, can you talk about the importance of building those relationships with each of the guys and how you have to cater your leadership to each of those different personalities?
Yeah, I think it's not easy, and it takes an investment of your time to be able to do that. I remember when Dan Quinn got hired, I always felt like I was a good leader, right? I felt like I worked hard and whatever. But I remember I used to always, at lunchtime, grab my lunch to go and go into the quarterback meeting room and watch extra film while I was eating lunch, right? And I remember Dan Quinn saying to me, he was like, I know you know what cover 3 looks like. He's like, I don't think you need to watch 25 clips or 100 clips of cover 3 over lunch. He said, I think it'd be far more valuable if you sat down and had lunch with some of your teammates that you don't normally have lunch with. And I remember, it's a small thing, but I remember it having a profound impact on me, being like, he's probably right. He's probably right. I need to get out of my own space for a little bit and sit down and have lunch with some different people. And I try to make an effort to do that. I think, you talk about meeting people where they're at. The offensive line group's very different from the wide receiver group, which is very different from the running backs, which is very different from the DBs or the linebackers or the D-line. And I think you have to find ways to do things that other people are interested in, and maybe not yourself, and get outside of that and go do it with them. And I always try to make, an effort to do that. If we're going on a road trip or we're going to London and we've got 3 days, maybe it is, grabbing dinner with the old line one night. We're going to, I learned how to play cards. I learned how to shoot dice. I learned how to gamble with the wide receivers and the D-line. And I'm pretty good now. I know how to do that kind of stuff. And so there is these things of kind of getting out of your own comfort zone and going and spending and investing the time in the people that are around. It doesn't have to be these monumental things, right? It is as simple as having lunch, right? Taking the time, check in. How you doing, man? Like, what's going on with you? Just little things, just being there. And I think those kind of things make a big impact.
Thank you. I'm gonna close this out with one question, but poor Rich has to listen to me throughout the year with my ideas for rule changes. And the NFL, one of which is overtime. Leave it there. So
Did that change this year for you?
thank you. Matt, there was a viral moment this year in the NFL with AJ Brown sitting on the sidelines reading a book during a game, Inner Excellence. And I'm curious from your perspective, were there any books or leadership materials or perhaps something like that, not that you read on the sideline, but that have been memorable for you on the leadership side?
I think the one that is probably, it's more of like, I was big on quotes and those kind of things, like little mantras or whatever. But I remember my first head coach in college was Tom O'Brien. He was a Marine. It was very structured, and he was great. I mean, you knew exactly where you stood with him. He used to come into the quarterback meetings all the time and would sit in there. And I remember I was a freshman, and he wrote on the board. He said, this was something we used to talk about in the Marines all the time, but in critical situations, we don't rise to the occasion, we sink to the level of our preparation. And that changed my life. It changed my life. It is when the game is on the line, you're not going to magically learn how to do something just because it's the moment that you do it. You're going to do it because you prepared yourself to do it. And I never lost sight of that, during my entire career. It was this idea of, I'm going to prepare so well that I don't know how I'm doing this in the moment, but my body's just wired, or my brain is just wired to know how to do it. And that is, that's probably the thing I think about the most that really impacted me from, a quote that you took to heart.
Excellent. Please join me in thanking Rich and Ryan. We appreciate your time, and if you weren't taking notes, I have a full page of gems that Matt dropped for us. And so please, thank you all. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah,